Okay, so after that video I did talking about how the Suns should win the finals, let's see if the Grizzlies can actually do that. So just to talk about Memphis a bit, I mean, of course, they've been amazing without Ja Morant this season, but maybe this is a hot take. I think they're going to need him for the playoffs. The energy around his injury doesn't seem to be that negative at all, so I'm choosing to not be that concerned. If something changes there, then, well, okay, that'll happen, And I'm actually recording this little bit after doing the rest of the video. So for most of this vid, I end up talking about the Grizzlies' defense and how they match up with other teams. So I want to talk about their offense and just a few general questions I have. So, number one, will teams do something besides just dropping on Ja Morant and kind of daring him to take floaters or pull up mid-rangers? Are they going to double team him? Are they going to switch on him? The question there then is, well, you're going to get killed in the post. Well, are they going to throw it to Steven Adams in the post repeatedly? What if Jaren Jackson's at center? The other thing is, if you're going to trap, can those big guys make the plays? I mean, Steven Adams, he's had his best passing season. I think a lot of that is operating at the elbows and running handoff actions with like Desmond Bane. Or they'll do some high-low stuff where Adams dumps it off to Jaren Jackson in the post. And I think that's gone pretty good, but it's a different thing when it's trapping Ja Morant and then swarming on Adams and then hopefully closing out to whoever it may be, or if it's Jaren Jackson, the one making the play off of the trap. Although there's also the chance of Ja Morant just splitting a double team because he's that good. Another thing I'm wondering is, how much are teams going to dare some of the Grizzlies guys to beat him from outside? I mean, Jaren Jackson's three has been a bit up and down. There's the chances of going like under everything on Ja Morant. Although even then, I feel like that's not going to stop Ja from getting inside. Also, you look at somebody like Zaire Williams, who's played a lot of minutes for them this season. Teams are going to dare him. They're going to dare Kyle Anderson. One thing with this, though, is maybe it's just Brandon Clark, but I feel like the Grizzlies are wired to just cut to the rim whenever they're being left open. But also, they're the best offensive rebounding team in the league, so you can't just forget about them for the sake of loading up on Ja inside. Anyway, the Grizzlies will get a play-in team for round one. And the thing is that the teams in the play-in are like kind of good. I mean, you've got the CJ Pelicans, who are pretty damn difficult to defend. You've got the T-Wolves, who have transformed what feels like 3 different times this season, with going from a super aggressive defense to a not as aggressive one recently. But they're just good. The Clippers held up without Paul George, and now they've got Paul George. There's a chance the Jazz or the Nuggets fall into the play-in, even if that's not very likely. You've got San Antonio floating around the play-in as well. I do think the Grizzlies will be challenged in round one. Maybe not in the sense of a series going 6 or 7, but like a competitive 5-game series with a couple games going down to the wire, that sort of thing. The reason why I would pick them to still win any round one series, I mean, obviously Ja Morant, but also their defense. I mean, you think about, they've got Dylan Brooks back, Desmond Bane. So having more of those on-ball defenders versus whether it's D'Angelo Russell and Anthony Edwards, or it's CJ McCollum and Brandon Ingram, or Reggie Jackson and Paul George, on top of the fact that Steven Adams has been playing a little higher up on screens this year than you might have thought he would if you were like a Steven Adams cynic, I guess. Of course, you still get your Jaren Jackson at center minutes, and when they were playing the T-Wolves, it was Steven Adams on Towns and then Jaren Jackson on Vanderbilt, so that kind of allowed Jaren to free roam a little bit, although you do still have to worry about Jared Vanderbilt and his going for 9 million offensive rebounds a game. I just feel like defensively, they're going to do enough to slow down these play-in teams, and I think a lot of that is Jaren Jackson, whether it's using him as a free roam guy, if the other team doesn't have enough shooters they can put out there, or you can have him at center and have him be switching a little bit more. I randomly think of like Jaren on Jackson Hayes to start a game versus the Pelicans, and what does that look like? Because of course the Pelicans have banked on, well, teams are going to ignore Jackson Hayes because of Valanciunas and CJ and Ingram, so you're going to cut to the rim and get something good. Well, I think Jaren is one of those defenders who's good enough to load up inside and help out in a CJ drive while also not giving up something back toward Jackson Hayes, The other thing is, if the defense isn't good enough, you have Ja Morant. And I'm thinking about the T-Wolves, and yeah, they've taken on a safer defense, but it's also like, it's Karl Anthony Towns backing up with Ja Morant coming at him, even if Patrick Beverley or whoever is going to do everything they can to get around the screen and all that. And you can be a little more physical in the playoffs. I just like Ja Morant's chances in those scenarios. If the Wolves chose to take on a more aggressive defense, then I think the Grizzlies would grab 1 million offensive rebounds on them. The Wolves have turned around their defensive rebounding, but that was off of not trapping every single time. And the Grizz are the best offensive rebounding team in the league. To go back to the Pelicans real quick, if Herb Jones is on Ja Morant, that'll be interesting. If the Clippers got out of the play-in, I feel like Paul George would just have to go insane for them to have any chance against Memphis. Anyway, we move on to round 2. I know I took a bit of time on the play-in, but I do think these play-in teams are good, and they deserve, a little bit more than just, yeah, they'll win that, no problem. Anyway, round 2. The team that I am a little concerned of for the Grizzlies, and honestly every team, the more I think about them, is Dallas. Because I think Dallas throws things at you that no other team does. The obvious is Luka. They're also the slowest team in the league, even after the Porzingis trade. The Grizzlies do not like to play slow, but it's very difficult to near impossible to speed Luka up. And unlike those teams in the play-in, I think Dallas can put out enough offensive talent to where suddenly Jaren Jackson's like, oh, wait a minute, can I really ignore Dorian Finney-Smith? Because he might go like 5 for 6 from 3 in this game or whatever, as well as still hold up defensively. I do want to mention, I am very intrigued to see how adventurous Memphis gets defensively and like where they're putting Jaren Jackson and if they ever go into like a switching more often, but still not everything. There's also the thing of against a team like Dallas, Luke is going to be like, hey, Ja Morant, I'm going to put you in every single screen tonight, so how do the Grizzlies get out of that without Ja having to hold up in isolations against Luka, However, I still think the combination of the Grizzlies' strong defenders with Dillon Brooks, Desmond Bane, they've tried Zaire Williams on Luka a bit this season, along with Adams and Jaren as well. I think it can be enough to not just get torched by the dude. I do think a Grizzlies-Mavericks series could go 7 games, with the difference maybe just being the Grizzlies grab a million offensive rebounds in one of the games. Although I have to mention, as of right now, the Grizzlies would get the Warriors in round 2, assuming they all won their series, but I think it's a decent bet that the Mavericks overtake the Grizzlies, or the Warriors, for the 3 seed. They're only a half game behind them, and while Jordan Poole is lighting the world on fire, and he has been for about a month, the Warriors they're having a bit of a tough time. I mean, so much of it is based on Steph's health. There seems to be a little less optimism around the Steph injury than the Ja Morant one, so that's not great for them. I do have to mention the possibility of the Grizzlies running into the Jazz or the Nuggets before we talk about a potential Suns West Finals. I mean, with Utah, it's like every day now there's another quote suggesting that these guys just don't enjoy playing basketball together, and I just have a tough time believing that they're going to hold up in a tough series. I mean, I'm not even talking about X's and O's and all that. And as for Denver, I just don't think the guys around Jokic are good enough. I think Jaren Jackson's going to have some liberties and leaving Aaron Gordon open for 3, even if Jokic will make the amazing pass to get it to him in the corner. Can Will Barton and Monte Morris hold up against the physical defense of, I keep naming them Dillon Brooks and Desmond Bane? There's also the matter of whenever Jokic sits, the Nuggets become the worst team in the league. And when I compare that to how the Grizzlies have held up when they've had some dudes out this season, I just think you got to give the nod to the Grizzlies, even if I also am like, yeah, Jokic's probably going to put up like 35 points in at least 4 of those games. Anyway, now we think about a Grizzlies-Suns series, and I mean, right now, in this moment, I think Phoenix would be the favorite in that. But again, these things are not a guarantee. What I'm thinking is if you have one guy designated to annoy the hell out of Chris Paul, and I think Dillon Brooks is your best option there, picking him up full court or at least at half court and all that, as well as, when Jay Crowder's in the game and if Jaren Jackson is on him, how much is Jaren really staying glued to him, at least when it comes to help stuff? We'll see. Some days Jay Crowder is awesome from 3 and other days not so much. Now if Cam Johnson's in the game, that's a little more frightening. However, then you could view that as a weaker link defensively for Phoenix, and perhaps that would free things up for whoever Crowder would have been guarding. I mean, it's tough to think of the matchups in a Grizzlies-Suns thing in terms of like who the Suns are guarding, because like is McHale on Ja Morant, or is McHale going to be on like, Dillon Brooks or Desmond Bane? Because of course those guys matter on offense for the Grizzlies. I mean, the answer is that McHale can do whatever, so there you go. But I'm also thinking about Devin Booker, of course, as you have to, and the thing with Phoenix, is that they're so good and they run so many creative off-ball actions where it's not just a Chris Paul screen trying to go at the center. Of course, they run down screens for Booker coming out of the corner, as well as for Mikal Bridges. They run Spain pick and roll with CP, as the ball handler. Devin Booker is the second screener. And again, there's Ja Morant, who is going to have to play defense in the playoffs. And we know how NBA offenses are in the postseason. It's a whole lot of, okay, who's the weakest link? You get up here. Well, Phoenix can force you to have Morant on Booker or whatever without having to run a simple screen, because if bodies are flying around, you're going to end up with some matchups that you don't love, unless you're the team trying to exploit the matchup, obviously. As for the Grizzlies trying to score on the Suns, I think Phoenix would definitely be like, hey, Jaren Jackson, you're going to have to prove to us that you're going to make a few of these threes, and I'm sure they would dare Dylan Brooks to make some shots, go under screens or whatever, because Brooks, again, he's got a bit of a daring shot selection. That's one way to put it. For the sake of time, I don't want to get too carried away, but again, I would favor the Suns over the Grizzlies. Them versus Dallas feels like a toss-up to me. And with the Warriors, it's about health right now. So basically, while Phoenix is still my favorite in the West, I would give the Grizzlies a chance to make the finals, yes. And as far as winning the whole thing, if you're there, then yeah, you've got a shot to win the whole thing. So for whatever that all means, there you go.